Hey, welcome to STV. On this week's show, we've got the very cool Yamaha Venom ready to go in afterburn. Then I head to the shop to clean the rave valves in the old Scuz-Z. We spent some time hanging out with Ken Avaan of the CSRA to talk about how the 2021 season is shaping up, and I head to JT Power Sports to look for some parts to fix up an old Olympic. Now we got a bunch to go through on this show, so we better get at it.
STV is brought to you by Yamaha, revs your heart. Polaris, think outside. Ford F-Series, Canada's best-selling line of pickup trucks for 55 years. Tough, smart, capable.
Over the last couple of seasons, there's been a theme developing in the snowmobile industry, and it's not about building the fastest, most powerful sleds on the snow. Instead, it's about building sleds that have a little different appeal to them. Just a couple of years ago, Yamaha and Arctic Cat introduced a line of 200cc displacement sleds, named the Snow Scoot and ZR200 respectively. Now, these sleds were the first mass-produced snowmobiles built for the youth market that were way more than the strict yard machines like the 120 class. Now for 2020, there's a new 400 class, again brought to you by Yamaha and Arctic Cat. And if you've been looking for one of these machines, you've probably figured out by now that they're really hard to find. You might even say they're sold out. And for good reason, which is they are awesome. Not only is this class of sled simply fun to ride, it appeals to a huge variety of buyers. Now, there's definitely an argument to be made that they're a stepping stone snowmobile for young riders who have outgrown the 200s but are still just a little bit too small for full-size snowmobiles. But this machine is also a great first sled for a new buyer, or a perfect sled for riders who just don't have the strength or even the want to muscle a big full-size sled around all day. So let's start with some stats. To begin with, the ski stance is a very stable feeling 38 inches with 7.2 inches of travel. Then there's a 121-inch track in the back with another 10.7 inches of travel. The engine is a 400cc single cylinder that's liquid cooled and fuel injected that puts out about 65 horsepower. Now the sled also has electric start, digital gauges, push button reverse, heated grips. It's got high and low beam headlight. It's got a brake light with tail light. It's got a windshield. It's got a really comfortable seat. It's even got a snow flap back there. Now, if this sounds like I'm describing a regular snowmobile, well, I am, because this thing is a real snowmobile. It's just a little bit smaller. In addition to all those regular snowmobile features, there's also 3 different models in the 400 class. The Yamaha SX Venom and the comparable Arctic Cat Blast ZR are the trail versions. Then in the mountain category, there's the SX Venom Mountain and the Blast M, and there's even utility style machines with the Transporter Lite and Blast LT. Each iteration of the 400s is as legitimate as the next, with specific details to optimize the ride experience in each, like the articulated rear rail in the utility sleds or the single beam rear suspensions in the mountain machines. By the way, both mountain and utility sleds in this 400 class have 146-inch rear tracks with 1.6-inch lugs on the utility side and 2-inch lugs on the mountain machines. Now, basically what I'm trying to get at here is how legit these sleds really are. To simply describe them as youth models is selling them way too short. This is backed up by the ride experience of each. At Snowshoe, I had the opportunity to squeeze the trigger on every one of the 400 class sleds, and each one was impressive. Now sure, you can't compare the Venom to the SRX, but in the mindset of the intended user, I can't see how buyers in this class will be disappointed.
I want to tell you that tonight I feel like the afterlife, but my vision is changing.
Another big plus of the smaller size is the smaller layout of the controls and seating position, which is still quite comfortable for riders up to around 6 feet tall. This smaller feel and reduced effort will make riders in this category easily capable of a full day's ride without feeling wiped out at the end of the day. Even the 65 horsepower of the single-cylinder two-stroke has a just right feel to it. It has plenty of low-end torque to get the sled moving, and for us, it topped out at an indicated 60 miles an hour while at elevation in Yellowstone. Now, absolute top speed isn't a requirement for this class, but its speed does mean the 400s can easily keep pace with other sleds when out riding in a group. About the only disappointing thing to this class is how rare these machines are. If you've got one, consider yourself lucky. If you want one, well, you better get your money down on one this spring. Now, I can't end this burn without kind of talking about the fact that this segment has been tried before in the past by Scuz-Z with their dubiously styled freestyle. Now, its success was debatable. For me, I thought it was ugly and the seat was too big, but I think its biggest problem was its timing was wrong. 10 or 15 years from now, though, I don't think there's going to be any debate on the success of the mid-size class this time. Coming up after the break, we're going back in time to look for some vintage Scuz-Z parts.
STV is brought to you by Motovan, for the love of power sports.
I came from the mud, there's dirt on my hands, strong like a tree, there's roots where I stand.
On a recent episode of STV, we checked out a collection of 120 snowmobiles that were all for sale in one great big large lot. Now, I would be killed to death if I brought 120 sleds home, but recently I managed to acquire just one. But it needs a few bits, so I've come here to JT Power Sports to look for them.
Try to catch me howling at the moon.
JT Power Sports is a full-service snowmobile and power sport repair shop, but they also specialize in snowmobile recycling and have an extensive inventory of used, hard-to-find parts. Walking around here is like going back in snowmobile history. Hey Jeremy, what do you think of the beast here?
That's quite the machine.
It's got some different parts on it. Can you name them? Here's a test for you. The seat's pretty easy.
Obviously Polaris seat.
Polaris seat on a, I think it's a 72 Olympic, eh? It's
Looks
somewhere
like a
around
70, 71, 72 Olympic for sure.
But have you noticed the track and rear suspension on
I
this?
think you got an Arctic Cat suspension under there.
I think that's what it is, slide rail. But check this out, like look at that travel.
Well, you know, it looks like you got a good quality shock going on.
So this is obviously very much a beater class, but I am looking for a couple of parts. It's got the Polaris seat on it, which has got the really cool mouse hole in the back here, I see. Remember these things had that caboose thing on the back?
Yeah, originally it was a plastic part that was on the back ahead of the
so
seat.
I'm not looking to restore this, but I want to fix it up a bit. So I need that
Make it look a little more original is what you're thinking.
These things had an engine cover on them, which really didn't do much for you, but I want to try to find one of those.
Well, it saved your jacket getting sucked into the carburetor while you're going down the trail.
Yeah, and then when it did get soaked in gas too, it would save it from catching fire with the backfire.
Yeah, that would.
Yeah, I remember those days.
All right.
Hopefully I'll experience them again on this thing. I think the gas tank has maybe got some rust in it. So if you had an old gas tank, something like that. And I know this is unobtainium anywhere, but is there like even a seat frame, or they were just all wood and rotted away, right?
That was a wood board with a piece of foam, so
Yeah.
we might be able to find a seat cover around here or something to help you out.
That's the only other thing. Like, I don't mind the Polaris seat, but it's not quite right.
Just doesn't fit the yellow hood.
Perfect. Well, let's go and see what we can find and see if we can get this thing looking a little bit more like a Skidoo should.
Sounds good.
Although I'm not changing the Arctic Cat suspension.
All right, let's go.
Okay.
They sing, gonna
Jeff, I think that back trunk you're looking for,
Yeah.
we might have one sitting in the showroom here. It's been sitting around for a little bit. Maybe we can make a deal.
I'm into a deal.
I'm thinking I got one.
There it is.
Look at that.
Is that the right?
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. It even sounds like it's got mounting bolts in there. Perfect.
Right on.
That's in pretty good shape too.
Yeah, it's a lot better than that ugly Polaris seat you got on there.
That's true. All right, let's go find some more parts.
Let's keep going.
I'm engaged.
Oh,
look,
I
there
think
it
we
is.
found what you were looking for.
Perfect, and it's even got the sticker on it. That's
That's
awesome.
an original badge. So somebody that's restoring their sled might be really into wanting one of those.
Well, it's gonna be mine now.
There you go.
And I noticed there's another back right there.
Told you we might have had a few around, but this one.
I like the other one better. It's got the tail light on it. So next thing on my list is a gas tank.
Let's go looking for some more parts.
Perfect.
All right, well, we keep all the old fuel tanks over here, Jeff, so let's
just
see if
a
we
few.
can track you something down.
It's like finding Easter eggs in here.
Well,
Looking for parts. Shock department over there, ski department right there, fuel tank department right there, hood department over there, random department over there, and a fuel tank right there. That'd work. Just something to put on the back to get rid of that stock one that's all rusty that's
you
underneath
probably
the belly
want to
pan.
put it underneath the hood, not
Somewhere.
necessarily on the back.
That'd work though. That'd get me there.
All right.
Perfect. What's next?
We're trying to catch me
Places like JT's here are a great resource if you're restoring an old sled. Now, I don't really plan on restoring this one back to original, but these bits will make it look a little bit more like a Skidoo anyways. I broke it. Just kidding. After the break, I'm headed to the shop to turn wrenches on the Scuz-Z.
This portion of STV is brought to you by CKX. Wear your passion.
I'm so happy because today I get to do exhaust valve maintenance on the Scuz-Z. Yay for me. Thankfully, they're really accessible. Yeah, not really. So while I dig into this process, I'm going to go to voiceover so I can curse the 1,000 springs that are holding this exhaust system in. So a little tip for getting these springs out, if you don't have a spring puller, use an old screwdriver, just kind of carve or grind a little hook into the end. But that little hook is a great way to hook the springs and then pull them on and off. If not, these things are a pain in the balls. Exhaust valves have become really popular in the 90s and have stuck with performance two-strokes ever since. Think of them as a crude way to mechanically introduce variable valve timing in two-cycle engines where there are no valves. This system is basically there to optimize the performance at both low and high RPM, which is always a compromise on two-strokes. With the pipes out of the way on the Scuz-Z, I'm going to use this used engine to kind of show you how they work, which is pretty simple. Basically, the exhaust valves on a Rotax motor are called rave valves, and what they do, like all exhaust valves, is at low RPM, there's a guillotine that's kind of blocking off a bit of the exhaust port. At higher RPM, that guillotine, in this case, gets moved out of the way with the assistance of exhaust gas pressure and opens up that exhaust port, giving you that high-end performance you're looking for. It's pretty simple. Now, back to voiceover while I get the rave valves out of that sled. Obviously, these valves live in a pretty bad environment, which is why they need to be on a cleaning schedule. Deposits from the burnt exhaust gases gum them up, and because there isn't a lot of power moving them in and out, just exhaust pressure and this delicate return spring for the rave valves, they basically get stuck and stop moving. So like I mentioned before, some of these exhaust valve systems are activated by cables, but essentially they all do the same job. They all live in the same environment, they're all gonna get dirty, and that means they're all gonna have to get cleaned. Now there's the why you have to do this maintenance. For the how, your best bet is to go to YouTube and download the correct procedure for your exact machine. Now, I'm still gonna walk through the cleaning procedure for these rave valves, but other systems could be a little bit different, and you wanna make sure you get it right. Whichever type of exhaust valve system you have, you will probably need a gasket and O-ring set, and I strongly suggest picking one up before you begin. You may get lucky and you can reuse the old gaskets, but these kits are pretty cheap, and if you don't need them, they don't go bad. Taking the system apart, the best thing to do is keep everything in order if you don't know it by heart. You'll also need some kind of solvent to help break down the deposit, so have that on hand too. And the other thing to remember is you don't want to damage anything, so don't use scrapers or hard files, and no grinders with wire wheels either. Be extra careful cleaning up the aluminum jugs too. Now it's hard to get down inside the bores, and you will be tempted to use a screwdriver to shove a rag in there. I'm not saying don't do that or that I've never done that, just be real careful. You can scratch things up in there pretty easily. Don't go overboard with solvents either. They can wash garbage down into the crankcase. Assembly is pretty straightforward. Now, I do like to do all three valves at the same time. It's a little faster, but you can do them one at a time as well. Either way, this is not a difficult job. And like I mentioned earlier, there's tons of videos online that will go into all kinds of detail for your specific application. So even a novice mechanic can get this job done. So there's always going to be a couple of details to pay attention to, like what side is the top side for the guillotine, and if there's any ports in the gaskets that you need to pay attention to. If you get this stuff wrong, you could cause damage, or the exhaust valves aren't going to work at all. Timing-wise for a job like this, it's gonna probably take you a couple hours, nothing more. But if there was a problem with the exhaust valves and you get them working again, you're definitely gonna notice a difference in the performance of your machine.
STV's Pro Tip of the Day is brought to you by Yamaha.
Today's tip is all about goggles if you're wearing this style of motocross helmet, and really the tip is pretty simple. Always carry a second set with you. The reason why you want to do this is if they start to fog up because they've gotten damp, there's really no way to solve that unless you have a second set of goggles. Now, what to do with that second set to transport them? Well, definitely don't put them inside your jacket to do that. When you take them out, the heat and moisture from in there will actually make them worse. Instead, find a place to store them on the snowmobile, maybe in a saddlebag, or like this Yamaha, you've got a spot up here just ahead of the handlebars in a little pouch. But what to do if they do get wet and you have to dry a set out? Well, first thing, stop on the side of the trail, open the cowl up and try to find a warm place to put them. That'll dry them out really nicely, just make sure they're not in there melting. Coming up after the break, we talk about the 2021 season of racing with the CSRA with Ken Avaan.
Closed captioning is brought to you by Best Western Hotels and Resorts.
Snowcross racing is one of the most spectacular wintertime spectator events you can find on the snow. And the CSRA has some of the best snowcross racing you can find anywhere. Now, 2021 is shaping up to be another good season of racing, but the way it's going to happen is changing a little bit because of COVID-19. To learn more about it, we caught up with Ken Avaan, race director of the series.
So for this season, unfortunately, we have a ton of changes that have to happen for our events to take place. As you know, the COVID situation is serious. We've got a protocol in place. We've joined a motorsports group that consists of all the car race tracks, motocross tracks, and snowcross tracks. That we've all worked together to create a protocol that will allow us to race at these facilities. But tons of changes. Basically this year we're going to build our whole race circuit specifically for the racers so they can continue their program. You know, the manufacturers have built these race sleds. They've been in engineering and production and everything else for well over a year. And now they're here, the guys have bought the sleds. So we want to create a program for these athletes to come in and use this equipment and be able to compete stay in shape, stay sharp, and get through this season best we can, and then move on to next year and have a normal season next year where we're allowed to have all our fans. This year, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to have fans on site. We do have distancing that's going to be required not only for anybody that's going to be on site, but even for the pit areas for the racers. They're going to have a designated spot to park with their vehicle and trailer. We'd be like drawing a 25-foot circle around them. You can imagine that's what it would look like. It'll be basically a bubble for that particular family. They can't go in and mingle with the other racers. They can't stand on the sideline and watch the races. There's no gathering together. Basically, they're coming to do a job. They're coming to race, work as a family, to do their competition. They're going to leave their bubble. They're going to go to the start line, do the race, and then go back. And that's just how it's going to be this year. So basically, the whole season is being built specifically for the racers. And after the races are over with, the racers will get the information out to their fans and their sponsors through social media sources. In addition to that, we're hoping to have all the events possibly broadcast live on TV or live streaming, and then also possibly re-aired again on a delayed airing on TV. So we'll get the message out to our fans that way, and that's what we have to do this year just to get through the season.
That's it for STV this week. Until we send it again next time, I hope you can keep your rubber band stretched tight.
STV is brought to you by CKX, wear your passion. Schaefer's, specialized lubricants since 1839. Best Western Hotels and Resorts, ready to get away?